So today's lesson is on sustainable urban living, and we're looking at a specific example which is very close to our school. It's in Stratford. It's called East Village. Some of you may have been there, or you may be aware of it. It's very close to the Olympic Stadium. Originally, it was the Olympic Village. It's been expanded since then and so on, but that's sort of the history of it. So it was all part of the 2012 Olympics. But now it's, you can see from the photo, an urban area, but it's been built to hopefully be quite sustainable, and that's why we're looking at it. Obviously, this builds on the work we were doing last lesson about what sustainability means and what it might look like in an urban environment. So objectives today then, to learn about this example and what its sustainable characteristics are, to be able to use this example to explain how urban areas can be more sustainable, and also to look specifically, East Village uses some quite modern systems for its water supply and also its energy and heating supply, which are fairly sustainable. So specifically looking at how it does that. So first of all then, just want to look sort of more generally at some of the key elements about East Village and what about it we could say makes it maybe more sustainable than some other urban areas. And I've got a list on the slide there. This list corresponds quite closely with the figure 16.3 on page 244. So if you've not got your textbook open in front of you, pause the video and open it to 244 so you can see that picture there, because that will add some further detail. But I'll give a little bit of explanation now. So top of my list there, I've got transport. So straight away you can start thinking about, well, what about transport would make a place more sustainable? On a simple level, I'd say what it is about transport makes it quite sustainable is making sure that the transport connections are very good. And there's two elements here. One is that you might remember, for an area to be sustainable, it's not only about the environment, it's about people's quality of life and so on as well. Well, obviously good transport links help with all of that, help people get around, feel connected and so on. But the other thing that is more linked to the environment is about the fact that if you've got very good public transport connections, people are more likely to use those and less likely to feel the need to own and run a car. Or even if they do have a car, they might use it less. East Village is a really good example of that. So obviously Stratford is a very well connected area anyway. So you've got Stratford station, which has got lots of connections on the London Underground, also on the Overground. It's actually got a station which is called Stratford International. It's slightly strange why it's called Stratford International, but it's one stop away from the main sort of Stratford station. So it's well connected there. There's lots of good bus routes that go through as well. So there's also, sorry, I should also say, places within walking distance. I mean, obviously you've got the enormous shopping centre and everything there. You've got good cycle paths and things. So it's very well connected before you feel the need to get in a car and drive somewhere. And of course, as we've already sort of talked about, and hopefully you already understand, public transport is more environmentally friendly. It's much more efficient than everyone owning and running their own car. So transport-wise, it ticks a lot of boxes. Second one, green open space. And you can see in the photo I've got there a nice example of the green open space, so trees and things. Again, we've talked about green space before and why that would be considered sustainable. So both environmentally, obviously it helps with urban biodiversity and things like that. It's also good for things like preventing flooding, sort of natural flood defence and things, having sort of permeable surfaces. But also when we think about people's just well-being, their enjoyment of an area, their connection with it. There's lots of different sort of research and things that shows that people's well-being is positively affected by having nature around them. And I think just when you look at that photo, it looks very pleasant. And you know, to be a sustainable area, it needs to be a pleasant place to be and live in. So there's that. Modern high density apartments, you can see some of the apartments towards the right hand side of the photo on the slide there. High density, you're not using up lots and lots of space in order to house people, so high density is good. The modern bit, and we'll come on to talk about that a little bit more in a second, but things like having very good insulation, so you're not using enormous amounts of energy to heat lots of separate old homes, but rather a smaller amount of energy, but lots of people live in that block that's very modern. And you know, there could be other things as well, so in the communal areas, they probably have lights that turn themselves off when, you know, they don't detect movement for a little while. So all these things to sort of save energy. Green roofs. A green roof doesn't mean just paint it green. It's when the roof itself has a layer of sort of organic material. So often they use things like sedum roofs. So this sort of looks like sort of grass or wildflowers on top. Again, that helps with when it rains, water can sort of soak in and it slows that flow of water down. It doesn't all just fall straight off the roof down into the river network and the sewer network. So it's good there, but also encourages biodiversity, looks nice and so on. Affordable housing. So Stratford, because it's got a great location and they're lovely new apartments, would be, if you just left it to the market, would be a very expensive place to live. So what they did is they said, well, half of the apartments we build are going to be rented out and the rents are going to be affordable. So if you like, normal people can afford to live here too. It's not just the preserve of the very wealthy, the very rich. Okay, so again, that's not so much about the environment, but it's about having a good, healthy community where you've got a mix of people can afford to live there and so on. Public services, obviously for a place to be sustainable, you need good public services, again, for the welfare of the people that live there. But also, if you've got good public services locally, again, you're reducing the need for people to regularly have to travel out of the area to go somewhere else. And there are some examples here you'll see in the book, things like medical centres, but also there's an all-through school, so like primary and secondary. I think it's called the Chobham Academy, I think is the name of it. So when they planned East Village, they also planned, you know, a school, so you weren't just building all these houses and then no services for people to use. Okay, so as I say, that's a little sort of whirlwind tour. Have a look at page 244. You know, there's some of them it goes into a little bit more detail. But if we were, as you'll see in the tasks, outlining why this could be considered sustainable, you'd want to talk about a mixture of those things to show from a number of different angles why East Village might be considered a sustainable urban area. So finally, just want to talk a little bit about the water and energy systems. You'll see these explained in more detail on page 245. First off then, I'll just say a few words about the water system. I've called this a grey water recycling system. I don't think they call it that in the book actually, they might do, I can't remember. But essentially what happens is water, so like rainwater that lands on the roofs, on these green roofs, it then sort of runs down and it runs into the waterways. You can see in the photograph there, we've got sort of, they look a little bit like canals or sort of big ponds or something. It runs into those and the water actually goes through those, there's reeds and things, so it's almost like a natural filter system. And then that water will eventually be piped down and around so it can be used again. Now, you might, if you've not heard of these systems before, think used again, that sounds awful, you know, you wouldn't want to drink water out of, you know, out of that open sort of pond or whatever. it's not, the water's not used for drinking and things like that. So an example of the use the water be used for is for flushing toilets. Okay, so you have sort of water systems in these apartments that have different pipes. The ones that go to your taps and you'd use for things like cooking, washing, drinking, that comes in a more traditional way. But say your toilets, the water that goes into those comes from this system. Now, whilst that doesn't mean that every drop of water used is recycled, no, of course not. The drinking water comes in the normal way, if you like. But under normal systems, you flush your toilets with water that's clean enough to drink. You know, you wash the car, you water the grass with water that has been cleaned and is good enough to drink. So what this system does is it greatly reduces how much of that water is used, because the uses for water where you don't need the water to be sort of purified, if you like, to that extent, you use this recycling system, which is very effective, and it saves about 50%, about half of the water that would normally be used is used in this area. The next one, in a similar sort of vein, is a combined heat and power system. So they actually have their own quite local sort of mini power station, I suppose. And that power station burns biomass to produce electricity. Now, you've probably learnt in science that the way electricity is produced is you often burn a fuel to heat water to make steam, and then that steam is fired through at pressure to turn a turbine and produce electricity. Well, within this station it does that, but the sort of the really clever bit is obviously they've just heated all this water up. That hot water then, rather than just being wasted, is piped all around East Village, and it goes into the apartments and things, so it can be used for heating. It's the hot water supply as well. So not only is it producing the electricity, but it also produces the hot water supply, and only that's not used but is eventually piped all the way back to this sort of mini power station, and is then heated again, and around it goes. So it can be used for heating and a hot water supply in all these apartments. So if you think, when we talked about air pollution in cities, one of the big contributors are people's boilers, their gas boilers in their homes. These apartments don't have their own individual boilers. They just have the hot water pipes directly to them from this system. And again, that saves overall about 30% of the energy that would normally be used. Obviously, it's burning biomass as well, which does release carbon and things like that, but you can, when you're burning biomass, it's not fossil fuels, it's things, if you like, that have been alive more recently. So it's a bit more of a, you're not unlocking carbon that's been held for millions of years in fossils. It's more what's in the sort of the carbon cycle now anyway, so it's considered more sort of carbon neutral than certainly than burning fossil fuels. Okay, so again, two systems. The textbooks have got little diagrams and tell you about those in a bit more detail, but that's a little outline of just generally how they work. Two tasks then I'd like you to do today. Using examples from the textbook, outline why East Village can be described as a sustainable development. So based on some of the things I said, what you can read in the book, just outline and give a mixture of things. It doesn't mean just talk about transport or just talk about services, a mixture, and make sure you explain what it is about those things that makes it sustainable. The second one, being a bit more specific about the energy and water systems that I use, it says there that they save 50 and 30% of energy and water. Explain how those systems work to achieve this. So this is a little bit more, this question, a bit more about the nuts and bolts to show you understand how they actually work. Okay, as always, the work, you can do it by hand and photograph it and upload it to Satchel, or you can do it on computer and upload the document. Okay, best of luck with that, and I'll see you in the Zoom lesson on Friday.